The champagne bubbled mockingly in my glass as I stood before our dinner guests, my heart racing with the thrill of what I was about to do. Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating 10 years of marriage to Nathaniel, but I had something far more important to accomplish. I needed to be honest. I needed to show everyone who I really was. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice carrying across the private dining room of Romano's. The faces looking back at me were familiar. My sister Corinne, Nate's mother Edith, our old college friends, and of course, Rowan Vexley, sitting just 3 seats down from my husband. Rowan's dark eyes met mine, and I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach. He'd been texting me all week, saying how much he was looking forward to tonight, how beautiful I'd looked at the office Christmas party, how lucky Nate was to have me. Those messages were still on my phone, time-stamped and waiting. 10 years ago, Nate and I promised to be honest with each other, I continued, watching my husband's face carefully. He sat perfectly still, his engineering mind probably calculating something boring about the restaurant's structural integrity. That's what he did when he was uncomfortable, retreated into his work brain. But sometimes honesty is complicated, I said, taking a sip of champagne. Sometimes we find ourselves appreciating the attention of others when we feel neglected at home. The room grew quiet. Corinne's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down. Edith's eyebrows rose slightly, her lips pursing in that way that meant trouble. Isolde, Nate said quietly, his voice carrying a warning I chose to ignore. No, let me finish, I said, raising my hand. I want everyone to know that I've been receiving some very flattering attention from someone at work. Someone who sees me, who appreciates me, who doesn't come home every night buried in blueprints and construction schedules. I looked directly at Rowan, who was shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His girlfriend Mara wasn't here tonight. She'd claimed to have the flu, but I suspected she simply didn't want to socialize with Nate's crowd. Her loss. The point is, I continued, I want to be transparent about the fact that I've been tempted, because when a woman feels invisible in her own marriage, she starts to notice the men who do see her. Isolde, stop, Nate said, his voice firmer now. But I was just getting started. I'm not saying I've done anything wrong, I said quickly, playing the victim card I'd rehearsed in the mirror. I'm saying that neglect has consequences. When a husband works 60-hour weeks and barely looks up from his laptop when his wife enters the room, well, other men notice. Rowan was definitely uncomfortable now, loosening his tie and reaching for his wine glass. He'd had quite a bit to drink already. I'd been counting. That was part of my plan, too. What I'm trying to say is that I've been getting some very inappropriate attention from Rowan here, I said, gesturing toward him with my champagne flute. And while I've tried to discourage it, I have to admit it's been flattering. The silence that followed was deafening. Edith's face had gone completely white, while Corinne looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Our other friends were staring at their plates, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. Isolde, what the hell? Rowan slurred, his words slightly thick from the wine. That's not what. Oh, I'm not blaming you, I said sweetly. I understand the attraction. I just think everyone should know that you've been pursuing a married woman, sending me texts about how beautiful I am, how lucky Nate is, how you wish you could take me away from all this. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through our message thread. Should I read some of them? You looked stunning at the Christmas party, Isolde. I couldn't take my eyes off you. Or how about this one? Nate doesn't deserve someone like you. You're wasted on him. Nate's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up abruptly. That's enough. Is it? I challenged, feeling powerful and vindicated. Because I think our friends deserve to know what kind of man you are, Nathaniel. The kind who ignores his wife so completely that other men feel free to pursue her. You're drunk, he said flatly. I'm honest, I corrected. For the first time in months, I'm being completely honest about what's been happening in our marriage. That's when Rowan made his fatal mistake. Whether it was the alcohol, the embarrassment, or some misguided attempt to prove his feelings, he suddenly stood up and stumbled toward me. Before I could react, he grabbed my shoulders and pressed his lips against my neck, right there in front of everyone. Isolde, he mumbled against my skin, you know I care about you. You know this marriage is killing you. The room exploded into chaos. Edith gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest. Corinne jumped up from her seat, knocking over her water glass. Our friends sat frozen in shock. But Nate just stood there for a moment, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but something colder, something final. Then he reached into his wallet, pulled out his credit card, and placed it on the table next to his untouched dinner. "The bill's covered," he said quietly. "I'm going home." And with that, he walked out of the restaurant, leaving me standing there with Rowan's hands still on my shoulders and 30 pairs of eyes staring at us in complete silence. I didn't get home until nearly midnight, after spending 2 hours trying to salvage the evening and explain to everyone that what they'd witnessed wasn't what it looked like. Rowan had been drunk, I insisted. He'd misunderstood my honesty for encouragement. I was the victim here, a neglected wife who'd been trying to save her marriage through radical transparency. Corinne had driven me home in uncomfortable silence, her usual chatter replaced by worried glances in the rearview mirror. When she finally spoke, her words cut deep. "Isolde, what were you thinking? That whole speech, and then letting Rowan kiss you like that in front of everyone?" "I didn't let him do anything," I snapped. "He was drunk and inappropriate. I was trying to be honest about the problems in my marriage, and he took advantage of the situation." "Honest?" Corinne pulled into my driveway and turned to face me. "You humiliated Nate in front of all your friends. You basically announced that you've been having an emotional affair, and then your affair partner kissed you at your anniversary dinner. How is that being honest? That's being cruel." "You don't understand," I said, gathering my purse and reaching for the door handle. "You're not married. You don't know what it's like to feel invisible in your own home." "Maybe not," she said quietly, "but I know what it's like to watch my sister destroy something good." I slammed the car door and walked up to my front porch, fumbling with my keys. The house was dark except for a single light in Nate's study. Our daughter Leela was staying at Edith's for the weekend. Thank God she hadn't witnessed tonight's disaster. Inside, the silence was oppressive. I could hear the faint clicking of Nate's keyboard from his study, the same sound that had driven me to seek attention elsewhere in the first place. Always working, always focused on something other than me. I kicked off my heels and padded down the hallway in my stockings. The study door was ajar, and I could see Nate hunched over his laptop, still wearing his dress shirt from dinner, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. "We need to talk," I announced, pushing the door open. He didn't look up from his screen. "Do we?" "Yes, we do." I stepped into the room, noting the scattered papers on his desk, bank statements, insurance documents, what looked like tax returns. "You embarrassed me tonight by walking out like that." Now he did look up, his grey eyes meeting mine with that same cold expression from the restaurant. "I embarrassed you?" "Yes," I said, crossing my arms. "I was trying to be honest about our problems, trying to save our marriage by putting everything on the table, and you just left. You left me there to deal with the fallout alone." "The fallout from your emotional affair announcement and public makeout session with my former friend?" "It wasn't a makeout session," I protested. "He kissed my neck. I didn't ask for it, and I didn't encourage it. If anything, I'm the victim here. He took advantage of my vulnerability." Nate turned back to his computer, his fingers resuming their steady typing. "Your vulnerability." "Yes, my vulnerability. The vulnerability of a woman whose husband pays more attention to his construction projects than to his wife. The vulnerability of someone who's been starving for affection and attention for months." Months, he repeated, still typing. His calm was infuriating. I wanted him to yell, to fight, to show some emotion. Instead, he was treating me like a mildly annoying interruption to his work. "Are you even listening to me?" I demanded. "I'm listening," he said. "You're telling me that your emotional affair with Rowan is my fault because I work too much. You're telling me that letting him kiss you in front of our family and friends was actually you being the victim. You're telling me that humiliating me at our anniversary dinner was somehow an attempt to save our marriage. That's not how I meant it." "How did you mean it, Isolde?" I sat down in the chair across from his desk, suddenly feeling exhausted. "I meant that I've been feeling neglected and unappreciated, and when someone else started showing me attention, it made me realize how broken things are between us. I thought if I was honest about it, if I put it all out there, we could work through it together. By announcing it to everyone we know, by being transparent instead of sneaking around behind your back." He saved whatever he was working on and closed the laptop. "So you're saying the alternative would have been sneaking around behind my back?" "That's not what I meant. What did you mean, Isolde? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you've been having an emotional affair with Rowan. You decided to announce it publicly, to humiliate me into paying more attention to you. And when your plan backfired, you're now trying to make yourself the victim." I felt tears prick at my eyes. This wasn't how this conversation was supposed to go. He was supposed to realize his mistakes, apologize for neglecting me, and fight for our marriage. "I just want you to see me," I whispered. "I want to feel like I matter to you." For a moment, his expression softened slightly. "Isolde, you do matter to me. But what you did tonight, there's no coming back from that." "What do you mean?" He stood up, gathering the papers from his desk. "I mean, I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, and we'll talk more tomorrow when we've both had time to process this." "Nate, please don't shut me out. I know I made a mistake, but—" "A mistake?" He paused in the doorway. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store. What you did tonight was a choice. Multiple choices, actually. And now we both have to live with the consequences." He left me sitting alone in his study, surrounded by the evidence of his methodical, organized life. The same qualities that had attracted me to him in college, his stability, his reliability, his calm competence, now felt like walls between us. I picked up one of the bank statements from his desk, noting his neat handwriting in the margins. Even his record-keeping was perfect. When had that stopped being comforting and started being irritating? My phone buzzed with a text message. "Rowan. I'm so sorry about tonight. I was drunk and stupid. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Not tonight. I need to fix things with Nate first." But even as I sent it, I wondered if there was anything left to fix. The next morning, I woke up alone in our king-sized bed, the other side cold and undisturbed. Nate had apparently spent the night in the guest room as promised, and from the sounds in the kitchen below, he was already up making coffee. I pulled on my robe and padded downstairs, hoping the morning light might have softened his mood. Instead, I found him sitting at the kitchen island with his laptop open, a cup of black coffee at his elbow, and that same collection of papers spread out beside him. "Morning," I said tentatively. "Morning." He didn't look up. I poured myself coffee and sat across from him, trying to see what he was working on. The laptop screen was angled away from me, but I could see more bank statements, what looked like credit card bills, and a yellow legal pad covered with his precise handwriting. "What are you doing?" "Paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" Now he did look up, and I was struck again by that cold, distant expression. The kind that should have been organized years ago. My phone rang before I could ask what that meant. Corinne's name flashed on the screen. "I should take this," I said, stepping into the living room. "Isolde, thank God." Corinne's voice was tight with anxiety. "I've been up all night thinking about what happened. Are you okay? How's Nate?" "He's Processing, I said, glancing back toward the kitchen. He slept in the guest room, but I think we can work through this. I just need to make him understand that I was trying to save our marriage, not destroy it. Honey, Corinne said gently, I don't think that's how anyone interpreted what happened last night. What do you mean? I mean, Edith called me this morning. She's furious. She thinks you deliberately humiliated Nate, and she's talking about flying back to Chicago early. My mother-in-law had been planning to stay for another week to spend time with Lila. If she left early, it would send a message to the whole family about where she stood on this situation. That's ridiculous, I said. I was being honest about problems in my marriage. If she can't handle honesty, that's her issue. Isolde, you announced your emotional affair at your anniversary dinner and then let your affair partner kiss you in front of everyone. That's not honesty, I don't even know what that is. It's not an affair, I protested. Rowan and I have never done anything physical. We're just friends who text sometimes. Friends don't text each other about how beautiful they are and how their spouses don't deserve them, Corinne said bluntly. And friends definitely don't kiss each other's necks at public events. I felt a flash of irritation. Whose side are you on here? I'm on your side, which is why I'm trying to help you see how this looks from the outside. Nate is a good man, Isolde. He works hard to provide for you and Leela. He's never given you any reason not to trust him. And last night you publicly humiliated him for, what? Not paying enough attention to you? You don't understand what it's like, I said, my voice rising. You're not married. You don't know what it's like to feel invisible in your own home. Maybe not, but I know what it's like to watch someone I love make terrible decisions and then blame everyone else for the consequences. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Corinne sighed. Look, I love you, but I can't support what you did last night. If you want to save your marriage, you need to take responsibility for your actions and stop trying to make Nate the villain in this story. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in the living room, staring at my phone and feeling increasingly isolated. My sister was supposed to support me unconditionally. That's what family did. Back in the kitchen, Nate was packing his papers into a manila folder. He'd showered and dressed while I was on the phone, khakis and a button-down shirt, his weekend uniform. Where are you going? I asked. Out. Where out? He looked at me for a long moment. Does it matter? According to you, I'm never here anyway. Nate, please, can we talk about this? Really talk without all the hostility. I'm not being hostile, Isolde. I'm being practical. What does that mean? He picked up his folder and his keys. It means I'm handling the situation the way I handle all problems, methodically and thoroughly. You're talking about our marriage like it's a construction project. Maybe that's the only way I know how to handle it, he said. Maybe that's who I am, and maybe that's the problem. It doesn't have to be a problem, I said quickly. We can work on this. We can go to counseling. Can we? He paused at the back door. Because it seems like you've already been working on it with Rowan. That's not fair. Fair? For the first time since last night, I heard real emotion in his voice. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to announce our private problems to everyone we know? Was it fair to let another man kiss you at our anniversary dinner? Was it fair to blame me for your choices? I felt tears starting again. I'm sorry. I know I handled it wrong, but I was just trying to what, Isolde? To hurt me? To force me to fight for you? To prove that you could get attention from other men? What was the endgame here? I didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, I had an answer, but it sounded petty and manipulative when I tried to put it into words. I just wanted you to see me, I whispered. I do see you, he said quietly. I see exactly who you are. And with that, he left me standing alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of our weekend morning routine and the growing certainty that I had miscalculated badly. My phone buzzed with another text from Rowan. Can we please talk? I need to explain what happened. I stared at the message, then deleted it without responding. I had bigger problems to deal with right now. But as the morning wore on and Nate didn't return, I found myself wondering if maybe Rowan was the only person who would understand what I was going through. After all, he was the one who'd seen how neglected I felt, who'd validated my feelings, who'd made me feel appreciated again. Maybe talking to him wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. By Monday morning, I was desperate to regain some sense of normalcy. Nate had spent the entire weekend either out of the house or locked in his study, emerging only for meals that we ate in uncomfortable silence. When I'd tried to bring up counseling again, he'd simply nodded and said, "If you think it would help," in a tone that suggested he thought no such thing. At work, I threw myself into my HR coordinator duties, hoping the familiar routine would provide some stability, but it quickly became apparent that word of Saturday night's disaster had spread beyond our dinner guests. "Isolde," my supervisor Janet called from her office doorway. "Could I see you for a moment?" I followed her into her office, noting the way she closed the door behind us. Never a good sign. "I've received some concerning reports about your personal conduct over the weekend," she said without preamble. "Reports that suggest you may have been involved in some kind of inappropriate workplace relationship." My heart sank. What kind of reports? The kind that mention you and Rowan Vexley in a compromising situation at a public event. The kind that suggests there may have been unprofessional communication between you two. I felt my face flush. "Who told you that?" "That's not important. What's important is whether these reports are accurate. Have you been engaging in inappropriate communication with a coworker?" I thought about the texts on my phone. Dozens of them over the past few months. Messages that had started innocent enough, but had gradually become more personal, more flirtatious. Messages that I'd encouraged because they made me feel seen and appreciated. "Rowan and I are friends," I said carefully. "We work in the same building. We've known each other for years through my husband. Any communication between us has been purely platonic." "Platonic friends don't typically kiss each other at public events," Janet said dryly. "He was drunk," I said quickly. "He misunderstood something I said and acted inappropriately. I was as surprised as anyone." Janet studied me for a long moment. "Isolde, I'm going to be direct with you. We have a zero-tolerance policy for workplace harassment and inappropriate relationships between coworkers. If there's been any kind of romantic or sexual communication between you and Rowan, I need to know about it now." "There hasn't been," I lied. "I would never compromise my professional integrity like that." "Good," she said, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Because I'm going to need you to provide me with copies of any text messages or emails between you and Rowan from the past 6 months. Just to clear the air and make sure there's been no policy violations." My stomach dropped. "Is that really necessary?" "I'm afraid it is. You can email them to me by end of business today. And Isolde, I strongly suggest you limit your interaction with Rowan going forward. Even the appearance of impropriety can be damaging to your career." I left her office feeling sick. The text messages between Rowan and me were definitely not appropriate for workplace review. There were dozens of them, compliments about my appearance, complaints about our respective relationships, flirtatious banter that had escalated over time. I spent my lunch break in my car, scrolling through our message thread and trying to figure out how to edit it down to something presentable. But the more I read, the worse it looked. Even I could see how these messages would appear to an outside observer. That's when I decided to call Rowan directly. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. "Janet wants to see our text messages." "Shit," he said immediately. "How much does she know?" "Enough. Someone reported what happened Saturday night, and now she's investigating whether we violated any workplace policies." "This is a disaster," he said. "Mara's already suspicious about us, and if this gets back to her—" "What do you mean she's suspicious?" "She heard about Saturday night from someone who was there. She's been asking questions about our friendship, about whether there's something going on between us." I felt a stab of irritation. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her we're just friends, but I don't think she believes me. She wants to meet with you." "Meet with me? Why?" "To hear your side of the story, I guess. to make sure there's nothing going on between us. The idea of facing Rowan's girlfriend was terrifying. Mara was a lawyer, sharp, direct, and not easily fooled. If she started asking pointed questions about our relationship, I wasn't sure I could maintain the fiction that we were just friends. "I can't do that," I said. "I can't meet with her." "Why not? If we're really just friends, what's the problem?" His question hung in the air between us, because we both knew the answer. We weren't just friends, and we hadn't been for months. Our relationship had crossed lines that neither of us wanted to acknowledge out loud. "Look," I said finally, "I need you to delete our text messages, all of them. And if anyone asks, we barely know each other outside of work functions." "Isolde, I can't do that. If HR is investigating, deleting evidence would make things worse." "Then edit them," I said desperately. "Take out the personal stuff, the compliments, anything that could be misinterpreted." "That's not how text messages work," he said gently. "And besides, what about the screenshots?" "What screenshots?" "The ones Mara took of some of our messages when she was going through my phone last week." I felt the blood drain from my face. "She went through your phone?" "She was suspicious after Saturday night. She found some of our conversations and took pictures before I could stop her." "What conversations?" "The ones where you complained about Nate not appreciating you. The ones where I said you deserved better. The ones where we talked about meeting up for coffee to discuss your marriage problems." I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in around me. Those coffee meetings had been innocent, mostly. We talked about our relationships, our frustrations, our dreams. But I could see how they would look to an outside observer, especially combined with our text messages and Saturday night's public display. "This is a nightmare," I whispered. "It doesn't have to be," Rowan said. "We just need to get our stories straight and stick to them. We're friends, nothing more. Saturday night was a misunderstanding caused by alcohol and emotional stress. End of story." But even as he said it, I could hear the doubt in his voice. And I knew that our carefully constructed story wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. Not from HR, not from Mara, and definitely not from Nate, who was apparently documenting everything with the methodical precision of an engineer preparing for a project review. As I drove home that evening, I tried to figure out how to salvage the situation. But for the first time since this whole mess started, I was beginning to realize that some things couldn't be fixed with the right explanation or the right spin. Some things were just broken. The confrontation I'd been dreading came sooner than expected. I arrived home Tuesday evening to find Mara Dorsey sitting at my kitchen table with Nate, a manila folder open between them and my husband's laptop, displaying what looked like screenshots of text messages. "Hello, Isolde," Mara said calmly as I stood frozen in the doorway. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by. Nate and I have been having a very interesting conversation." I looked at my husband, who was studying me with that same cold, analytical expression he'd worn since Saturday night. "What's going on here?" "Mara came by to share some information she thought I should see," Nate said. "Information about your friendship with Rowan." My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to remain calm. "I don't know what Rowan has told you, but—" "He hasn't told me anything," Mara interrupted, sliding a printed screenshot across the table toward me. "But his phone has been very informative." I looked down at the image and felt my stomach drop. It was a text conversation between Rowan and me from 3 weeks ago, complete with timestamps and our full message thread visible. "Rowan, you looked incredible at the office party last night. I couldn't stop watching you." "Me, thank you. It's nice to feel appreciated by someone." "Rowan, Nate's an idiot if he doesn't see what he has." "Me, he's too busy with his projects to notice much of anything these days." "Rowan, his loss is my gain. I love our conversations." "Me too. You make me feel alive again." "This is taken out of context," I said quickly. "We were just what?" Mara's voice was sharp. "Just having an emotional affair behind both of our backs." She slid another screenshot across the table. This one was even worse. Rowan, I keep thinking about our coffee date yesterday. You're amazing, Isolde. Me. I keep thinking about it too, about what you said about us. Rowan, that we'd be perfect together? I meant every word. Me. I know, I feel it too. There are dozens more like this, Mara said, her professional composure cracking slightly. Months of messages where you two discuss your feelings for each other, complain about your respective partners, and plan secret meetings. I looked at Nate, desperate to explain, but his expression had gone completely blank. He was looking at me like I was a stranger. It wasn't like that, I said. We were just friends talking through relationship problems. I never meant for it to go this far. This far? Nate spoke for the first time since I'd entered the room. How far did it go, Isolde? Nowhere, I said quickly. We never did anything physical. We just talked, that's all. Mara laughed bitterly. Just talked? You mean like this conversation where you discussed leaving your husband for him? She produced another screenshot. I didn't even need to read it to remember what it said. It was from last month, after a particularly bad fight with Nate about his work schedule. Me. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just left, if I just walked away from all of this. Rowan, you know I'd be there for you. We could start fresh, just the two of us. Me. Don't tempt me. Some days that sounds like heaven. That was just venting, I protested. People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. Do they? Nate's voice was deadly quiet. Because it sounds like you meant every word. He turned his laptop around so I could see the screen. It was displaying a spreadsheet, because of course Nate had made a spreadsheet. The columns were labeled with dates, times, message content, and what appeared to be some kind of categorization system. I've been analyzing your communication patterns with Rowan, he said in the same tone he might use to discuss a construction timeline. Over the past 6 months, you've exchanged an average of 15 messages per day. The content has become increasingly intimate, with clear expressions of romantic interest beginning approximately 4 months ago. I stared at the screen, horrified by the clinical precision with which he'd documented my betrayal. You went through my phone? I didn't need to, he said. Mara provided me with screenshots of Rowan's side of the conversations, and I was able to reconstruct your responses from context. It's amazing how much you can learn from data analysis. This is insane, I said, my voice rising. You're treating our marriage like a research project. No, he said calmly. I'm treating your affair like the systematic deception it was, and the data is quite clear. He clicked to another tab in his spreadsheet. Here's a timeline of your coffee meetings with Rowan. 7 in the past 3 months, always when you told me you were shopping or running errands. Here's a correlation between your complaints about our marriage and the intensity of your messages with him. And here's a pattern analysis showing how your communication with him increased on days when you and I had disagreements. I felt like I was suffocating. Stop it, just stop it. You're making this sound like something it wasn't. What was it then? Mara demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been carrying on an emotional affair with my boyfriend for months, culminating in that public display at your anniversary dinner. It wasn't an affair, I said desperately. We never did anything physical. Physical isn't the only way to cheat, Nate said quietly. Emotional infidelity is still infidelity, and according to this data, you've been emotionally unfaithful to our marriage for months. I sank into a chair, feeling completely overwhelmed. I was lonely, I was feeling neglected and unappreciated, and Rowan made me feel special. I never meant for it to become what it became. But it did become what it became, Mara said. And now we're all dealing with the consequences. She stood up, gathering her screenshots and shoving them back into her folder. For what it's worth, Rowan and I are done. I can't be with someone who would carry on like this behind my back. But I thought you both deserved to see exactly what your spouses were doing. She looked at me with undisguised contempt. You destroyed 2 relationships with your selfishness. I hope it was worth it. After she left, Nate and I sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, I found my voice. What happens now? He closed his laptop and looked at me with those cold, distant eyes. Now we deal with the consequences of your choices. Our choices, I corrected. This marriage takes two people, Nate. I didn't get to this point by myself. You're right, he said, surprising me. This marriage does take two people. Two people who are honest with each other, who respect their vows, who don't seek emotional intimacy outside their relationship when things get difficult. He stood up, gathering his papers. I've been thinking a lot about what you said Saturday night, about feeling neglected and unappreciated. And you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe I did work too much. Maybe I did take you for granted. For a moment, I felt a spark of hope. So we can work on this. We can fix it. No, he said simply, because the solution to feeling neglected isn't to have an emotional affair. The solution is to talk to your spouse, to go to counseling, to work on the problem together. What you did was choose deception over communication, and that's not something I can forgive. Nate, please. I'll be staying at my mother's for the rest of the week, he said. I think we both need some space to figure out what comes next. As he walked toward the door, I called after him desperately. What about Lila? What do we tell her? He paused in the doorway. We tell her the truth, that Mommy and Daddy are having some problems and need some time apart to work things out. And if she asks why? He looked back at me one last time. We tell her that sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they love, and there are consequences for those choices. And with that, he was gone, leaving me alone with the wreckage of everything I'd destroyed. 2 weeks later, I woke up to find a manila envelope propped against the coffee maker in the kitchen. My name was written across the front in Nate's precise handwriting, and the return address showed the law office of Morrison, Keller and Associates. My hand shook as I opened it, though I knew what I would find inside. The divorce papers were comprehensive and thorough, just like everything else Nate did, but it was the accompanying documentation that took my breath away. He'd included printed copies of every text message between Rowan and me, organized chronologically and highlighted for easy reference. Bank statements showing the dates and locations of our coffee meetings, cross-referenced with my lies about where I was going. Credit card receipts from restaurants where we'd had lunch, time-stamped and categorized. There was even a psychological evaluation report that he'd apparently commissioned, detailing the emotional impact of infidelity on children and recommending a custody arrangement that would provide Lila with stability during the transition. But the most devastating document was a letter addressed to me, typed with the same methodical precision as everything else he did. Isolde, it began, by the time you read this, I will have filed for divorce and moved my belongings out of the house. I want you to understand that this decision wasn't made in anger or haste, but after careful consideration of all available evidence. Over the past 2 weeks, I've had time to analyze, not just your affair with Rowan, but the patterns of behavior that led to it. I've reviewed our conversations, our arguments, and your responses to being confronted with your actions. What I've found is a consistent pattern of manipulation, gaslighting, and refusal to take responsibility for your choices. Even now, after being presented with irrefutable evidence of your emotional infidelity, you continue to blame me for your actions. You've told our friends, your sister, and even our daughter that I'm overreacting to a misunderstanding. You've portrayed yourself as the victim of my neglect, rather than the architect of our marriage's destruction. I want you to know that I've documented everything. Every lie you've told about where you were going, every attempt to manipulate the narrative, every instance of you trying to gaslight me into believing that your affair was somehow my fault. This documentation will be presented to the court as evidence of your character and fitness as a parent. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Isolde. I'm doing this to protect myself and our daughter from further emotional damage. You made a choice to betray our marriage vows, and now I'm making a choice to end our marriage with dignity and legal precision. The custody arrangement I'm proposing gives you generous visitation rights, but primary custody will remain with me. Given your demonstrated willingness to deceive and manipulate, I believe this is in Lila's best interest. If you contest this arrangement, I'm prepared to present additional evidence of your behavior to the court. I hope someday you'll be able to take responsibility for your actions and learn from this experience. Until then, all communication between us should go through our respective attorneys. Nathaniel Marrow. I read the letter 3 times before the full implications sank in. He wasn't just divorcing me. He was systematically dismantling my life with the same methodical approach he brought to his engineering projects. I called Corinne first, but her response was not what I'd hoped for. "I'm sorry this is happening," she said carefully, "but I can't say I'm surprised. You made some really destructive choices, Isolde." "You're supposed to be on my side," I protested. "I am on your side, which is why I'm telling you the truth. You need to take responsibility for what you did and stop trying to make Nate the villain here." I hung up and tried calling my mother, but she'd already spoken to Edith and had formed her own opinions about the situation. Even my closest friends from college seemed to have chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. By afternoon, I was desperate enough to call Rowan, hoping he might provide some support or validation. Instead, I got his voicemail. "You've reached Rowan Vexley. I'm currently out of the office on extended leave. For urgent matters, please contact my supervisor directly." Extended leave. He'd probably been fired or forced to resign after the HR investigation, just like I probably would be once Janet finished reviewing all our communications. That evening, as I sat alone in the house that would soon belong to someone else, I tried to figure out where everything had gone wrong. But every time I traced the events back to their source, I came to the same uncomfortable conclusion. I had made a series of selfish, destructive choices, and now I was facing the consequences. The doorbell rang at 8 o'clock. I opened it to find a process server with another manila envelope. "Isolde Marrow?" "Yes. You've been served." This envelope contained a restraining order preventing me from contacting Rowan or his family, a notice that my employment was being terminated for violation of company policy, and a bill for the private investigator Nate had apparently hired to document my activities. I sank onto the couch, surrounded by legal documents and the wreckage of my former life. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I allowed myself to really look at what I had done. I had destroyed my marriage for the validation of a man who had abandoned me the moment things got complicated. I had humiliated my husband in front of everyone we knew, then blamed him for my actions. I had lied to my family, my friends, and myself about the nature of my relationship with Rowan, and now I was facing the consequences: divorce, unemployment, social isolation, and the very real possibility of losing primary custody of my daughter. My phone buzzed with one final text message from a number I didn't recognize. "The moving truck will be there tomorrow at 9 a.m. to collect my remaining belongings. Please have everything packed and ready. My attorney will be present to document the handover. This is the last communication you'll receive from me outside of legal channels. N." I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then set the phone aside and looked around at the house where I'd thought I would grow old with Nathaniel. Tomorrow, movers would come and take away the last physical reminders of our life together. The day after that, I would sign papers officially ending our marriage, and then I would have to figure out how to rebuild a life from the ashes of everything I had destroyed through my own selfish choices. For the first time in months, I was completely, utterly alone with the truth of what I had done. And the truth was this: I had no one to blame but myself. The next morning, I watched from the window as Nate supervised the movers with his characteristic efficiency. He never once looked toward the house, never acknowledged my presence. To him, I had already ceased to exist. As the truck pulled away with the last of his belongings, I found a final envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a single photograph: Nate and Lila at the park, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. On the back, in his neat handwriting, were the words, "This is what happiness looks like. I hope someday you find yours without destroying someone else's." I set the photograph on the empty kitchen counter and finally allowed myself to cry for everything I had lost and everything I had thrown away.